blended family. How is your Monday going? We pray that it is amazing. This is going to be a phenomenal week for you. Today, we are talking about parenting differences. This is actually part two.
Part two.
Part two.
That's a movie, right? Part two? Yeah.
We're taking it a little further than what we did last week. Last week was more on talking about our parenting styles. What is our parenting style? Is really identifying that, right? Recognizing it, identifying it. Today, we're taking it deeper. How can we use our parenting styles to start working together with our spouse to really go and crush parenting together in a blended family? So we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes, so y'all stay tuned.
All right, guys. So yeah, like Randall was saying, last week we were really just identifying it. I hope that if you haven't yet, go back and listen to that episode because it really sets the stage for today. But you want to be able to recognize what those parenting styles are because it makes a big difference. So I was thinking about this story with our middle child, our son, Devin, and like I was saying in the previous episode 1 of this, is that I was very permissive parent. I was very permissive until I felt like I was backed into a corner or the kids just really wouldn't listen and I would go into like authoritarian mode. So with my son, like he ended up getting like a bad report at school and I was just, I was ashamed and embarrassed, I will say that, because as a teacher, I feel like I should have been able to get my kids, to be able to have A's, and he got in trouble with something at school, didn't have the grades he was supposed to have.
Yeah, he had a problem with just not turning in his work. So that was, he never would. But that was a lot of the ADHD struggles.
He has ADHD,
that we had, yeah.
And so his thing was he couldn't even get his name on his paper, get his papers turned in, and he was he still is, such a smart boy. And so for him to get these reports at school saying that he's failing things, like it would just boil my skin because I would get so frustrated because I'm like, he can do this. What is the problem? So I remember like going off on him and just thinking that if I just threw out this punishment, it would like force him into submission and to do what I was asking him to do. So I like grounded him for like 6 months from his electronics.
You're grounded kid for 6 months. Like, you won't see the light of day.
We wouldn't ground him from like all of life, but for him, he loved video games. And in our house, we use like, there's just fun words that we've used with our kids, like not purposely try to be fun, but like just like electronics is what we would call them. And that was because you couldn't just ground them from their DS because then they had this electronic and that electronic. So it was just like to blanket everything. You're grounded from your electronics for 6 months. Anything with a plug, you can't do. And man, so at this point though, so I'd grounded him and now we're out and about and I realized that because like a charger or something fell out of his backpack or his coat. And I just remember like seeing it and realizing like he had went and like snuck another electronic, like an old one or something, and I am fuming. Like, I'm like, what do? I can't ground him for longer than 6 months because we're only like a few weeks into this grounding. Like, what do I do now? So I came home and I approached Randall with it and I'm like laying out the story and I'm just like so boiling mad. And he was able to like
calm you down.
Chill me out because I was ready to like take everything out of his room. Like he was fixing to have like nothing but a mattress and no door, no nothing. Send him off to boarding school. We've got to nip this in the bud.
No electronics for you, kid. You're gone.
Your whole life.
You will pass this class.
So I just got myself all worked up again, just even thinking about it. And I share that story because, I mean, maybe you're not as extreme as I am. But again, remember, at this point, I'm the permissive parent. I'm the one that lets things go.
And it wasn't until really that moment is when we learned to come together. Mm-hmm. Because when she approached me, I could see how upset she was over this. And I knew the state that she was in. You can't act well, especially with kids. We can't sit there and and give them any type of punishment or any type of anything from that in that emotional state. So really, when I saw that, it's like I've got to calm her down. But that was part of my personality as well. And what we did is after we talked about it, now I was pulled into that, and we had been many years now into our marriage. So this worked a little better to where we could sit Devin down, and we had it to where it was a good conversation, to where it wasn't more of that authoritarian mentality, because he had already had that and rebutted, so we knew that wasn't working.
Yeah, and I knew we were gonna have to sit down and have a big serious talk, but I was still so mad. I was like, I can't take the lead on this. You're gonna have to take the lead.
And so once we were able to do that, I was able to calm things down, talk, and hear his voice, and give him some power in that which he was fighting so hard for, and really reach an understanding. And once we got through that, that's when we started looking and saying, you know what, if we come together more and do this, man, okay, this could totally change the way that we parent and the way that, our kids can receive that. So I guess what we've coined it is different doesn't equal wrong. And in my mindset, being that back then, that authoritarian parent, whenever I came to terms with that, and I realized that if I keep approaching this my way or the highway mentality, I'm hurting my wife, because now she feels she has to hide who she is from me. And I'm hurting our kids because I'm not giving them a voice in the matter. I'm shutting them down, and really learning that it's not just one way. We all have a voice in this. We all have a thought process in the way that we think, and we all think differently. And whenever we start talking about this, it's like, you know what? Okay, different doesn't equal wrong. Just because you have your personality, because we each have different personalities, right? Mm-hmm. And one personality isn't better than the other personality. And that was big for me to realize, because, once I'm starting to see, kind of like the story we shared last episode, with her taking the kids out of school to go do a fun event as a reward, and I was so against that. Now I'm seeing that as, that wasn't that bad. That could have, you could have really created some fun moments and memories with your family.
Well, and it took him getting a different type of job that did allow for that, and it opened his mind up to that, that is a possibility. So as we're growing, we're also, like we were saying last time, evolving in those things.
Yeah, and really that was the power behind it, was understanding your way isn't necessarily better than my way, and my way isn't necessarily better than your way. But what we learned is being able to come together and realize that and start using our strengths. So that was the other key point, is each one of us has strengths. Each one of us has weaknesses. And knowing your parenting style, you can start pinpointing those easier. My authoritarian ways, that was both a strength and a weakness. I could take control, but I could also take too much control. But then I also had a lot of authoritative in me, to where I could really come to a situation really calm and kind of really start working together and what's the best way to get through this situation.
Yeah, the one thing that I really admired, that it took a while for us to, in our marriage, to see this over and over again, and that Randall would be able to do, is that he could see the situation, he could put a punishment or a consequence for the situation, and then he could come back and give you a hug and say, I love you, bud, or, I love you, daughter, it's going to be okay, whatever. Whereas when I finally got to the point of a punishment, I would be so mad. I'm like, I don't want to hug them. I don't want to tell them, it's not going to be okay. I'm still so mad. My emotions, I couldn't, just bring them down like that. But when I would watch him, to be able to walk into the situation and be able to stay completely calm, which people will, even say that now, that know you, and see you in outside of family situations, just such a calm guy, so even keel. And it's he can come into a crisis type situation that I created, and he would be able to just come in it and see it from that perspective. And then again, like I said, be able to come at it with still a consequence, not just letting him off the hook, but also that softness afterwards.
And kind of the strengths that you had were you would see the positive in everything. You would see kind of the beauty in everything. And to whereas I wouldn't, I'd always see what's wrong or the negative. And so you gave more of that broad perspective of life and of our kids, just the beauty and the positive parts of each and every one of our family members. And that to me was I was able to step back and not focus on the negative, but kind of let you guide on seeing the beauty and the positive in each other. And that was just something that, we could start leaning on each other and using each other's strengths to move forward in our parenting style. But it was really being able to talk about it first.
Yeah.
And once we established, okay, this is kind of how I am, this is how you are. And then a lot of times our weaknesses, like I was saying, for the authoritarian, I didn't want to be that, and so I did have the authoritative in me. So I started trying to work more on that. And you had more of the permissive, but yet you had the authoritative. So you started working more on the authoritative and not allowing your emotions to control you as much. And whenever we would fall in any one of those areas, we start leaning on each other to help. And that would kind of balance us out as parents.
Yeah, and it's definitely like what you have the ability to look for that, because like in part one that we were talking about, and we were highlighting our weaknesses for sure in part one and how we started out, but then now like we're sitting here and like saying the beauty of what you see in the other person, like that took work and like looking for it, purposely saying like, okay, what is their strength? And I know sometimes in the middle of it you can be like, they ain't got no strength. There's nothing there. All I see is the negative, and it can, because the negative does seem to stand out more, especially when it's emotionally driven. But being able to like take a step back from that and really even asking God, like I love to ask God, like show me their strength, show me what it is that he does well in this area. And God comes through every time. He starts to present opportunities for you to see those strengths. And then when, like Randall was saying, when you can come together with that, when I experienced that moment with Devin and I allowed Randall to come in that way, and I was able to see just the beauty in that of how he handled it, and he wasn't emotionally driven, it set us up for our future issues with the kids, where I would come home, because I am more permissive, and like he was saying, able to see the bigger picture and stuff, the kids would open up to me a lot more in certain areas. And then, or I would be around them more, just being the mom and being, in the situation with them more, that it would also fuel my fire, and I would be mad or frustrated or upset. And then I would come to him and I would tell him all that. I would like rant to him, tell him everything that was going on, and then he would be able to take the lead, like, okay, we've got to talk with the kids about this, or we got to talk to whichever kid it is that's dealing with it, and able to sit down and let him guide it. And then I could just come in and kind of share my heart in these, and not feel like I have to come in with all the anger and the wrath.
But it wasn't until we knew each other's differences and we realized that we could pull on each other's strengths. So like we said, so we really have three key points here. One is difference doesn't equal wrong. So just because you know your parenting style now, because you listened to the last episode and you've talked about it with your spouse, now you know each other's parenting style. Just because they parent that way doesn't mean it's wrong. Just because I parent the way I parent doesn't mean it's wrong. We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. We can use our strengths and we can work on our weaknesses, and we can allow our husband or our wife to help balance us out. So now the point two is we can use each other's strengths to now parent better together. And then the last thing to bring up on this is communicate with each other. Mm-hmm. This is one of the biggest things that we learned that brought us closer together, just as husband and wife, and it made us better parents to our kids, because before we were parenting different. We were...
You meant separated.
We were separated. You were parenting your way. I was parenting my way. I was parenting my biological kid one way. You were parenting your two biological kids one way. And we were just keeping things separate in our marriage because we believed each other was wrong. And we didn't really come to terms with how we parent, and we didn't come together and try to parent together. But once we knew this, we came together, and the more we did it, the more it drew us closer. The more we were level-headed approaching a situation. I remember this one time, now later on in our marriage, Devin was now older, and he's 19 still. He had moved back home with us, and we were both watching him, and he had at that time a part-time job, barely working, and staying in his room all day playing video games. And that was his life. No ambition to move forward, doing things, staying out late with friends, partying, things that you and I, coming in late, waking us up in the middle of the night. And I was at a boiling point. I was ready to kick him out. Is where I was. To be honest with you, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go give him the boot. But instead, what we had learned, these things that we had put into place, I brought it to her attention one morning. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do anything. Because at that time, I think I'd heard him come in and it woke me up. I wanted to get up out of bed, go up there and say, get your stuff and get out of the house. That's where I was at, because I'd let it build for a long period of time to get me to this point where my emotions wanted to take control. But instead, I remember saying, no, I'm not going to do that. I brought it up to her the next morning at the breakfast table saying, something's got to change here. And she had thought the same thing. She's like, yeah, I agree, and so I kind of threw out my viewpoints of, I think we should, give them an ultimatum. You need to do this or get out. And she was like, well, what if we use this as a teaching moment, as a way of saying, what are your next steps, and let's try to financially get you there, and let's emotionally and financially get you there. And so we started talking back and forth on what that could look like. And it was just a powerful moment, because we changed from, if I just took control over that, I'm kicking them out. And now we came together, had a better situation, a better idea of how to approach it. And it turned into a beautiful moment. We actually used that to sit him down and say, hey man, what are your goals in life? Where do you see yourself in 5-10 years, and okay, well, you want to move out. Okay, well, cool. Well, how much money does that take? And then that turned into a whole teaching moment of working out a budget. And let me tell you now, he's got him a better paying job. He's on there. He's moved out. He's doing so well for himself. But had we approached it the other way, he could have been just couch surfing now. But we use that as a teaching moment. But that took us coming together and pulling on each other's strengths, bouncing ideas off on a problem within, our kids, what we were seeing, that we knew there needed to be a change. And it brought up just a powerful moment, and
even just for him and, for their step bonding, because even though he was the one that was like, I was mad too, but he was the one that was, initiating this and just really upset with it. And then for me to be able to see the bigger picture and me to present a different outlook. And then he was the lead, like walking Devin through this process of what does that look like to move out, and then looking at the numbers and all of this stuff. And, Devin coming to him and asking him questions.
Hey, we'll be back momentarily. Check out this announcement.
Are you tired of complaining about your blended family and you just want to start enjoying it? Scarlett and Randall here, and that's where I was several years ago until Randall and I, we began to start searching and seeking out solutions for our family. We knew that we wanted this to be a success, but we didn't know how to get there. So we began searching and finding different resources. So we created this Mom's Quick Guide to Blending Her Stepfamily. It's a 5-step process for blending success. We took all the things that we've learned over the years and we've put it in this one guide for you so that you can stop complaining about it like I was and start enjoying your family.
There's so much power whenever we actually start taking some of these steps. You see the momentum shift in your family. You see so much better results, more blessings. That's what we had found out whenever we started going through it, because things weren't working as good as we wanted. Things were okay, but we wanted it better. And whenever we started doing these things, man, we saw such a change. And we want that for your family as well. We want you to have this guide. It's 5 simple steps, 5 things that you can do that can help get you those results that you want. And right now, whenever you get your copy today, we're throwing in some extra bonuses just to sweeten the deal for you. So go get your copy with all the bonuses while we still have this offer going. The link will be in the show notes below. Now back to this episode.
When we learn these things, we are working towards being able to be better at it. But it's our natural instinct, like for Randall, it was his natural instinct to go back into that drill sergeant type mode, but he had to choose different in that moment. And the reason he was able to choose different as well is because he came to me and we talked about it. And, you know, I go through the same thing. Like, I will revert back into my old ways of doing things, and then I'll have to come to him and he's like, no, remember, this is how we do things now. This is how you do things now. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Because it's my nature, because you've done something for so long, it's driven in you. It's like ingrained in you to keep doing it the way you used to do it. And so even when you learn new skills and you put them into practice, when certain things trigger you in those areas, it can make you revert back to your old way. And you have to have that sounding board, someone there to help remind you of like, no, that's not how we do it anymore. So.
And that's the beauty of being able to come together and start working together. In blended families, we start with you on one side and you on the other. And that's, you know, we fall in love, we get married, and we just love each other. But then whenever we start getting into the real nuts and bolts of family, we have these differences, and that's normal, that's natural, and it's beautiful. But we need to, it's better whenever we let that pull us together instead of push us apart. Yeah. So when we recognize our parenting differences, when we sit there and know, okay, I'm more heavy on this, you're more heavy on that, and we start identifying each other's strengths and coming together and starting to use that in our parenting, there's power in that. But any situation that comes up with our kids, unless it's an emergency, if you can step back and you can go talk with your spouse over it, go do it behind closed doors, not in front of the kids. But you're talking about saying, hey, this came up, this happened. Even if it's with your biological kid or if it's with your bonus kid, it doesn't matter. You're stepping back and you're taking a time to now come together and talk about it, bounce ideas off of each other. Then you can approach the situation a lot more in control of your emotions, which your kids benefit from that, you benefit from that, and you're able to give better consequences that fit the crime. Instead of saying, you're going to be grounded for 6 months from your all electronics. And if we're doing that out of the heat of our emotions, which we do, it's easy for us to do, but that's not a consequence that really fits the crime, and it's not a consequence we really want to carry out. We can get a week into it and going, why did I say that?
Yeah, like when you take the phone away from the kid and then
it's like, now how do I get a hold of them now? I can't even, and so it's always better to be able to step back, talk with each other about the situation, and then reach a common solution together, and then present it in front of the kid. And we always say, and what we've heard from a lot of the great psychologists and therapists is, in a blended family, especially in your first few years, the one presenting the consequences should always be the biological parent. They should always be the one to step forward, but that doesn't mean that you haven't talked with your spouse behind the scenes first, and y'all both reached a common solution that you both say, yeah, this is it. Okay, I'm thinking this. Well, what about this? And then, you're bouncing those things off. But then whenever you're talking with the kids, you're both there, but the biological parent is the one presenting the consequences and talking more on that. Now, it can shift, as is done like within us, but it's taken us, 10, 15 years to where now we can sit down with the kids and I can be the one presenting more things and doing things, but that's because we've gone through a journey of getting there. But the more that we approach it this way, the more we come together, the faster that we really take the blending process to where now it's just a beautiful family dynamic that we're doing, and we're parenting so well together because we're taking the time to step back, talk about it, come up with a good solution, calm our emotions down, and then approach the kids. Man, it has worked out so much better in our marriage every time that we do that. We see such better results when we do that and we come together. So there's power in that.
Yeah, and I'd like to and he said earlier, unless it's an emergency, so if it's like a safety issue where you have to make a decision right there, then to do that. But you, for one, you want to spend the first few years, like what we're saying we've learned and experienced, is establishing a relationship with your stepchild before you're coming in and you're being that person that's dishing out those punishments. So focus on building that relationship with them. As a school teacher, and even as in the youth, as a youth leader and youth pastor and all that, like one of the very first things that I tell other people is like, I won't ever like go down hard on someone else, like, and give them a consequence or come like angry at them if I don't know their name. Like if I don't know, if like I've never had a real conversation, that's not my place. So it's a little different in blended families, but focusing on that time of getting to know them and finding that commonality before you start dishing those things out. And then like he was saying, unless it's an emergency, but really consider what is an emergency. Because in the beginning, when I was a lot younger, I would see things as getting the report card and looking at it and, or getting, the kids getting D-Haul or something, and those things would be emergencies. And they're not. They're not emergencies. I didn't need to dish out all of the stuff that I did. It could have waited. I could have taken some time. Having like a key word in there, like we'll talk about this later when you're in that heat of the moment. If you're like, hey, I don't know if this is emergency or not an emergency, no one's bleeding, but like, hey, I'm really frustrated right now, we're gonna talk about this later. And then just being able to take time to speak with your spouse, that gives you that little like window opportunity.
And it's powerful having a word, just a phrase, and even coming up with that behind the scenes saying, okay, well, when I get to this point, emotionally, when my emotions get too high, I'm saying this. That way now I can step out of that situation, have time to cool off, have time to talk with my husband, with my wife, and then we can come back and approach the situation when our emotions are in check, when we're in more of a calm state, is powerful. So that will definitely shift parenting together, and you'll get such great results when you do that, because it is so easy to want to parent out of emotion. It's so easy to just want to, and especially as the bonus parent, to want to sometimes act out and give consequences and things of that nature out of turn, and it just causes more problems in our family, and we don't want that. We want to be able to step back, work together, and come up with a better solution, then come to the table. Man, I'm telling you, it has changed us so much. It has changed our kids. Like we said, just that, thinking about Devin and where he was, if I had reacted the way I wanted to, where he would be today because of that. It's life-changing in a sense. So, it really is. It's very powerful whenever we step back and do these things. So this week, talk about it. Talk about each other's strengths. We took last week to really figure out, okay, what is my parenting style? What is my spouse's parenting style? Now start talking about each other's strengths. What is a strength that you feel that you have? What is a strength that your spouse sees in you? Now start talking about those things, and now once you talk about that, how can you use that moving forward in parenting together? So that's really a powerful step whenever you're starting to talk about that. Man, I'm telling you, it is really cool. And then that is an intimacy thing too, because now you're kind of sharing each other's strengths and you're talking about that. Who doesn't want to hear your strengths? Yeah. Who doesn't want your spouse sitting there saying, well, you're really good at this, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, more, soak it up.
Hey, when you were saying my strength, I was like tearing up. I'm like, oh, you think that about me?
But it's so powerful. It really is. It creates an intimate moment which will bring you closer together. When you and your spouse are closer together, you parent better together. Your kids do better. They need us parenting together. So great stuff. Go talk about your strengths and how can you use that moving forward. Man, good stuff. Step back from a situation, calm down, talk together. Power in that. All right. Well, that is Parenting Differences. Part 2. Part 2. So y'all have a blessed week. We will see you on the next episode.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for joining us today for another episode of Enjoying Your Blended Family. All the links we've talked about today, they're in the show notes below. If you've enjoyed listening, be sure to subscribe below. It's free and it lets you know when we have another episode for you to listen to.
And if you want to help us out, leave us a rating and review so that we can keep reaching more people. Until next time, remember to enjoy the moment.